Oh, really?
Painted a light color like that.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. The hour is 7 o'clock, and as mayor, I hereby call to order the Laconia City Council meeting scheduled for August 24th, 2015. As always, we'll begin our meeting tonight with a salute to our American flag. Please rise and join Councilor Armin Bolduc in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America
and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We'll note for the record that the minutes tonight are being taken by City Clerk Mary Reynolds, and I would ask Ms. Reynolds to please call the roll.
Counselor Doyle?
Here.
Counselor Bounce?
Here.
Counselor Littman?
Present.
Counselor Bear?
Present.
Counselor Hammond?
Present.
Counselor Baldwin?
Here.
Presiding Mayor Edward Engler?
Here. Let the record show that all 6 councilors are present this evening and a quorum has been established. And also for the record, note that we are joined at the front table tonight by City Manager Scott Myers and City Finance Director Donna Woodeman. First order of business is acceptance of minutes of previous meetings. We have before us tonight the minutes of our last meeting on August 10th, and I have been informed by the city clerk that there is a new standard under Robert's Rules of Order for the approval of minutes that does not require them to be voted on. I'm assuming that that means unless there are any corrections. So, using the new procedure that has been outlined for me, I will note that the minutes have been distributed by the clerk on August 14th, and to ask the councilors if they have any corrections for those minutes. Since no corrections have been offered, I simply have to say that note that there are no corrections and that the minutes are considered accepted as distributed. And that will be our new procedure for accepting minutes of meetings. No vote required. Next up, we have consent and action calendar. We have one item on the consent and action calendar tonight, and that is the revised temporary traffic order for the 2015 Pumpkin Festival. You have that in your packet. And for the public, I would say that from glancing at this, it seems like the significant change here is simply to note that the parking regulations that we approved earlier would go into effect at midnight on that Saturday morning as opposed to 6 a.m. that morning, so 6 hours earlier than we had originally approved. Is there any questions about the revised temporary traffic order for the Pumpkin Festival?
Just for clarification, Mr. Mayor, Beacon East is also closed now under the revised temporary traffic order where it was not closed on the original one.
Okay, I'm sorry. And you have a map in your packet there. Any questions? Okay, a motion would be in order to approve revised temporary traffic order 2015-07 Pumpkin Festival.
So moved.
Moved by Councilor Bolduc. Is there a second? Second by Councilor Hamel. Any discussion of this traffic order?
One question, also they're taking the parking lot here and here, that's new also, isn't it?
Yes, I believe it is.
I believe originally this one was slated to be vendors, and Carmen Gifford is here from the Lakes Region Chamber. Maybe she can comment on it, but I know the response has been tremendous, and that's why you see additional vendor tents over there. So there are items that are in the works that will allow people who are in the parking garage to get out, even though Beacon Street East would be closed, to allow vendors to come in and offload their materials and set up their booths, then use the parking garage. And we'll make exceptions. We've coordinated, or Carmen's coordinated with the post office, so a lot of background's gone in. But this parking area was always slated to be used for vendors and tents and that sort of stuff.
So the parking garage will be used for businesses downtown or whatever. So how are they going to get out? Will they be allowed to leave, or?
We're in the works with something I think Carmen can answer better, but I had that same question, and it's going to be a very user-friendly system for those who work in the downtown, yes.
We welcome Carmen Gifford from the Chamber of Commerce.
Thank you. We actually revised this based on conversations with the police department and the fire department and the anticipation of more people than we originally expected. We originally thought 20,000 people, and we're now looking at 30 to 40,000 in attendance. And they wanted to make sure that the space was more spread out and less congestion. So what we're looking at with the parking garage is that it would be used for the businesses downtown, the residents, and then any vendors, and they'll be able to come out and go the opposite direction, and there'll be a police at the entrance to Route 3 and Main Street.
Okay, so they would have to come up Beacon East like they
Yes.
do now to get into
Right.
there, and then they'll go out the same way?
And we'll do placards that they can place on their car so that we know who's going in and out, and they'll be notified in advance.
Just curious, since you mentioned it, how are you coming with that estimate of 30 to 40,000?
Actually, the police and the fire department did that, and they've been working with Homeland Security, the police and fire in Keene, looking at past aerial photography, doing a 2-hour radius from Laconia versus a 2-hour radius from Keene. So we're now looking at Portsmouth, Portland as people coming in. And we're seeing that in our vendors and participation already.
Okay, the train.
The train.
Now, in the paper, I might have read it wrong, but it sounded like it was going to Winnisquam and back.
Yes. The
So it's
train.
not going to go to the Weirs?
No, the train had already pre-sold their tickets for foliage, and there was no way they could run the trains both directions without impacting the schedule of the tickets they had already sold, and they wanted to make sure they were being
So the
fair to their...
foliage, but where does the foliage start and end? The train?
Well, they'll bring the train down from Meredith in the morning early, down through the Weirs to Lakeport, pick up folks in Lakeport that are the vendors and the sponsors from Zippo, and come down to the main street, and that will be their hub from the rest of the day. So the train rides will go from downtown to the Mosquito Bridge and back, which is a ride they typically do, and it'll be every hour on the hour. So it will be crossing the other direction. It'll be an attraction
What
ride.
parking is down here? I mean, I thought it
It's
was
not
going
gonna
to
be for
use the
parking.
Weirs to bring people here from the Weirs.
We will, but we'll be using shuttle buses.
Oh, okay.
We have over 11,000 parking spaces identified with shuttle buses.
Okay.
So there's going to be group parking at the Mosquito Bridge?
There's no parking. It's just strictly a train ride with the Winnipesaukee Hobo. They're just running
Okay,
it
so
from
it's
their
it's an
location.
attraction, not a people-moving...
Exactly.
Okay, so I don't understand the connection between foliage and October
they can-
24th.
They consider it their foliage ride, so.
They're giving foliage rides on October 24th?
Yeah, they still have foliage rides going on their regular tour.
They don't come here for 5 years and they do a foliage rise on Pumpkin Day.
No, they have also sold their foliage rides from Meredith to the Weirs in Lakeport and back.
No, but they don't come here.
Counselor Bolduc?
Yes, did you say they were going to be going to Lakeport?
They're coming through Lakeport with the very first run, and then when they get here to the train station, here downtown, their run will be downtown to the Mosquito Bridge and back every hour.
So they won't
And
be-
then they'll bring the train at the end of the day back up to
So
the
they
Weirs.
will not be going to Lakeport back and forth.
Right. But again, this is the Winnipesaukee Railroad, this is their business, they're the ones that set their schedule.
So where do they run their foliage rides from?
Meredith. Yep.
This is supposed to be a consent and action item. We're going to be on it for an hour.
It's local business, we need to be respectful of what they've done, and they have people that are here for other events that are doing rides, so.
Counselor Lippman has a question.
Appropriate, I'll move that we approve the,
We already got them.
We already have a motion
Okay.
on the floor. Any other discussion? Okay, all those in favor of approving this revised temporary traffic order for the Pumpkin Festival, please raise a hand.
Right.
5 affirmative votes, the motion is carried. Thank you. Next up is citizen comments for matters not on tonight's agenda. Is there anyone in our audience tonight who would wish to address the council on a matter that is nowhere on tonight's agenda? If so, that now would be the appropriate time. Not on tonight's agenda. Nope. Okay, interviews. We have several interviews this evening, and I would ask the interviewees to come to the microphone, if you would, and introduce yourself and tell us where you live, and also tell us briefly, if you could, why you desire to be appointed to this position. First up, we have for the Heritage Commission, seeking appointment as an alternate member for a 3-year term is Jane Whitehead. Ms. Whitehead?
Hello. I live at 245 Pleasant Street. I've just moved into town full-time. I've retired from my teaching job in Georgia, but I'm not new to town exactly. I've been coming here since I was a little girl when my grandfather was president of Scott and Williams, and I've inherited the house on Pleasant Street.
Congratulations.
I am an archaeologist, so heritage is very important to me. Although I've retired from teaching, I haven't retired from directing the excavation of a Roman bath complex in Umbria that I direct every summer. I'll continue with that. But the ancient, not just the ancient, but old things are so important to the preservation of the character of a community, and I'm very committed to that. What else do you want to know? My education.
I'll ask if anyone has any questions.
Thank you for coming forward.
Okay.
Any questions? Okay, thank you very much. I should have said at the beginning for the applicants that under council rules, we do not make appointments on the same night we do interviews for given applicants. Those appointments would be made typically at the next meeting of the council, and the applicants are not required to attend that second meeting. They're welcome to if they like, but it's not a requirement. Okay, next up, library trustees. We have 2 alternate positions available, and I believe I've been told Mrs. Hayes is not here tonight, or could not be here, but, oh, I'm going to mess this up, I'm afraid. Josh Peltonvik? Is that right? Is Josh here? No Josh either, and I was right about Susan Hayes, I presume. We have no Susan Hayes here tonight? Okay, so we have neither of those 2 people. Personnel Advisory Board, Joan LaRue.
Hi. I'm Joan LaRue. I work at Bank of New Hampshire. I just celebrated 25 years there. I've been in Laconia for 32 years. I live on Reagan Way in Laconia, recently moving there from over by the hospital where I've lived for 32 years. I have a staff of 23 at the bank and work very closely with them, and I just think that this position here would be something that I have some experience in and would like the opportunity to see what it's about.
Thank you. Any questions for Ms. LaRue?
Thank you.
Councilor Bear.
What does the Personnel Advisory Board do?
What I know of it, which is little, is that if there's a dispute with a city employee who is not part of the union, then the Personnel Advisory Board listens to that dispute and makes decisions. In addition to that, there's an Employee of the Year that we participate in making decisions on that.
She get an A for that?
She gets.
Do I?
Yes. There we go.
Right on.
Thank you.
Very good. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Good question.
Thank
We're
you.
asking quick questions.
Conservation Commission. Well, we have the same Josh Peltonvik, unless he came in. I'm assuming he's not here for that interview either. And finally, for the the Weirs TIF District Advisory Board, Joseph H. Driscoll III. Hi, Joe. I didn't know you were the third, sir, so I didn't know which one we were expecting.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, no, he's the 4th. I'd just like to say, I put my name forward for this. It's been a while for this. I was really, really hoping that some of my fellow citizens would step up hey, folks on TV, please look at all these people who volunteer for you. Come forth. I think this is an exciting opportunity. These TIF districts, I think, are going to do great things for our city, and I'd like to be part of that. I was there for our discussions in forming the whole idea about forming a TIF districts for the Weirs, and I feel I've given my fellow citizens enough chance. I'm here before you. I'm hoping that advisory board will start work soon. Thank you very much. Any questions?
Any questions for Mr. Driscoll?
One more job. Thank you.
Thanks.
All right, thank you. Okay, we have no public hearings tonight, so we do have some presentations. And for that, I'm going to come around to the front microphone. We have some front porch awards to give out tonight, which is always a good thing. And this is a program we have, for those of you who are not familiar with it, whereby we try to recognize substantial efforts that have been made to improve the appearance of buildings in the city. And probably our biggest challenge with this program is identifying such. Some of these are on very well-traveled streets, and we all become aware of them simply by driving to and from work and stores and whatnot, and others tend to be on streets that we don't all drive in on every day, and those are the ones we need help with, especially so this is a plea to our citizens, if you will, that when they see something in their neighborhood, if you see something in your neighborhood where someone has made an extraordinary effort to improve the appearance of their property, if you would bring that to the attention, please, of the city manager's office, so we could take a look at it and judge for ourselves, and they would be then eligible to receive one of those awards. And we have 4 awards to give out tonight, and in effect, this is a thank you award on behalf of all the citizens of the city, through the city council and the administration of the city, to thank these people for investing in our city and their property in our city, and making it generally a better place to live. So first up tonight, we'd like to recognize the effort of Bullfish Investment Company for their work on the apartment building at 101 Messer Street. Is there someone here tonight from Bullfish? Yes. Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Why don't you use the microphone here and just tell us your name so we can get that for the record.
I'm Matt Bull from Bullfish. I'm Ron Haddock from Bullfish.
Okay, great. Well, we thank you very much. This is on a well-traveled street, so we're very familiar with this building and the work you've done on it, and we're very appreciative.
We look forward to many more.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Next up, we have a landscaping award that's being given to the South Down Shores Condominium Association. Oh, we have 3 recipients tonight. All right. Very good. Congratulations and thank you. Congratulations and thank you, and same to you. You did all the planting, I'm sure, yourself?
You did.
No. Why don't you tell folks who you are?
My name is Susan Gilchrist, and I'm co-chair of our garden club.
And I'm Mary Louie Anderson, and I'm a member of the beautification committee.
And Peter Cassell, Secretary of South Down Recreation Association.
Okay, perfect. Well, we thank all 3 of you for coming tonight, and we congratulate you, and we thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You bet. Sure. Take a picture here. You got somebody to take it? Yeah,
Thank you very much.
Thank you. That's awesome. Next up, we have recognition for Josh Youssef for the property at 42 Guilford Avenue. Josh?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Congratulations.
Thank you very much.
And
If I
tell-
could just tell a short story about
Please.
this property. Having grown up in Laconia, I've always had kind of a special affection for this property, not really knowing why. I guess I just liked the architecture and the antiquity of it, and I purchased it at, I mean, just a blowout price. I had to buy it, let's put it that way, in 2011. And I just let it sit because I wasn't ready to take on the project, and I let it sit for about a year. And during that year, I'd check on the property periodically, and I went inside when I finally got ready to, dust everything off and start putting a coat of paint on and what have you. And I found a multitude of notes inside the mail slot there are 2 mail slots, from people that either grew up or had some sort of relationship with the house. And that led me to do a little bit more research and learn so much more about the house. And since then, I've been presented with pictures and artifacts from a variety of people who have ties to that home since it was built in 1780, being the oldest standing home in the city of Laconia. And it really proves to me that it's a living, breathing part of this city. And I'm just really proud to be part of the history of it, really. Because one day I hope to be able to give some artifact that I uncover from the dirt floor in the basement, perhaps, to maybe one of the next owners of the property. So proud to be part of it.
Well, congratulations.
Thank you.
We're proud of what you've done.
Thank you very much.
So I think everyone heard that, but just in case they didn't, Mr. Youssef is the custodian now of the oldest home in Laconia. And lastly, we have another residential property on North Main Street, 968 North Main Street, Daniel Ingram and Carly Brigham. Are they here tonight? Nope. Okay. Sorry, so we'll make sure we get this to them, and we thank them for their efforts and for their neighbors in recognizing what they have done on that property as well. Thank you. Next up is the mayor's report. I have a couple of items that I would like to touch on tonight. Find my notes. The first off is to call attention to the fact that this Friday and Saturday, we have the 2-day Reimagine Laconia event in the city, which is a design charrette featuring the team of engineers and architects from the Plan New Hampshire group visiting our city. And this 2-day event, Friday and Saturday, will feature multiple public input sessions, an informative workshop about local economic development, and design sessions where volunteer architects, engineers, landscape architects, and other design professionals will come together to create maps and drawings that will visually represent what we want Laconia to look like. There will be 2 public sessions at the Belknap Mill on Friday, one at 3 o'clock and one at 6 o'clock. And all are welcome to attend either session, either at 3 or 6, depending on what fits your schedule. And the planning department would appreciate if you would pre-register for these sessions so they have some idea of how many people to accept. And you can do that by calling the planning department at 527-1264, 527-1264, or by going online to www.reimaginelaconia.org. That online address again is reimaginelaconia.org. And then on Saturday, the final design plans will be presented at a public meeting at 2:30 p.m. at Grace Capital Church. For those of you who are not familiar with Grace Capital Church, that is in what most of us refer to as the downtown parking garage building, right across the street, in effect, from the Belknap Mill. So at 2:30 on Saturday afternoon, That group of visiting architects and engineers will present their findings and their maps and drawings based on input that they have received from people here in Laconia and based on on their own expertise. So that is this Friday and Saturday, and we're all looking forward to that. Changing subjects, if you would, if you will permit me. My next subject, showing my age a little bit here by way of introduction, with apologies to Joni Mitchell, remembering back to 1970, a song she wrote called Big Yellow Taxi, some of you may be familiar with, that includes the familiar refrain, "Don't it always seem as though you don't know what you got till it's gone?" And my subject in bringing this up is Motorcycle Week. And my thoughts this week were not only about Motorcycle Week this past week, but also about the Pumpkin Festival. And the two are drawn together in my mind by virtue of the fact that we are the recipient, and all the incredible volunteer effort and organizing effort that's going on in our city now is due to the fact that the city of Keene passed on continuing to host the Pumpkin Festival. And after all the effort that's been made there over the years to build that up into the spectacular festival that it was, and I'm sure they had their reasons for doing so, or at least for taking a hiatus from putting on the event, and I don't pretend to question those motives. I don't live in Keene, but clearly their loss is our gain. And I suspect that as the years go by, they will look back on that decision and regret that they took the course that they did. And I don't want us to someday look back and say that we made the same kind of mistake with regard to Motorcycle Week. I think we're all aware of the fact that Motorcycle Week is, from an attendance standpoint, is not what it once was. And any number of reasons for that, and I don't need to get into those tonight, and that the Motorcycle Week Association, which is the promoter of the event, has had its share of problems in recent years, financial problems and otherwise. Armand and I, representing the city on that board, have spent a lot of hours over the last just year on my part, on Armand's part more than that, serving on that board and going to many, many meetings and whatnot. And there has been a considerable rift behind the scenes that is now public, thanks to the owner of Laconia Harley-Davidson making an appearance a week ago tonight before the Board of Selectmen in Meredith, at which time she called public attention to the rift and her disagreements with the Motorcycle Week Association, and defending why her company pulled out of membership in the association and any financial association with the association, and also recommending publicly, she did, that the town of Meredith do the same and discontinue their support of that association. So that means, what some of you may not know is that at this point in time, membership in the Motorcycle Week Association in terms of voting membership is down to, or was down until our last meeting last week, 5 members. And 2 of those are municipalities, the town of Meredith and the city of Laconia, and 3 businesses. Just in the past year, Laconia Motorcycle, Laconia Harley-Davidson has dropped its association with Motorcycle Week, its official association with Motorcycle Week, as has the Weirs Action Committee dropped its association with the Motorcycle Week Association, stopped paying dues, as has New Hampshire Motor Speedway. And so there's 3 dues-paying members of the board right there that have dropped off just in the past year. And I won't comment extensively on Mrs. Deely's remarks to the Meredith Selectmen, some of which I agree with, some of which I certainly do not agree with. And if Armand has any follow-up, I'll leave that to him at the appropriate time to make in terms of his observations. But she did make one statement that I completely concur with, and that is, and she mentioned that she had had a meeting recently, and by recently I think this year, I don't know exactly when, with a high-ranking official in state government, and about what she saw as the state's lack of support for Motorcycle Week from a promotion standpoint. And basically what she told the Meredith Selectmen was, yes, I get lip service in terms of how important the event is to not just the Lakes region, but to the entire state of New Hampshire economically, from an economic development standpoint. But when asked specifically, what are you going to do to help us, I get nothing, or words that in effect mean nothing and no action. And that, in a nutshell, I completely agree with that assessment, by the way. And I think that, in a nutshell, is the big issue here, and that is that we have way too many people and businesses who benefit from Motorcycle Week directly or indirectly, who, for whatever reason, take a pass on supporting Motorcycle Week from a financial standpoint, or at least from a substantial financial standpoint. And I think for the rally to continue and prosper into the future, that's just got to change from the state, from the city, from merchants, businesses, individuals, and whatnot. We've got to find some way to rally and build this event up again, because you couldn't invent an event of this size. I mean, Lord knows how many hours are spent in other cities and towns trying to come up with something like the Pumpkin Festival or the Motorcycle Week to attract people to their town with disposable money, disposable incomes to spend on meals and entertainment and rooms, et cetera, et cetera. So I hope that we don't follow Keene's example. And let me say in closing that I understand that there are people who have differences with the Motorcycle Week Association, which the city is an active member of, and it is not my purpose to call that motivation or those questions or ideas to question those. But it is not enough, in my opinion, to say that you simply don't agree with the direction from a marketing standpoint or any other standpoint with the Motorcycle Week Association as it is currently structured. There are other ways to support Motorcycle Week than simply doing that. What is unacceptable to me is to stand by and do nothing, to take money from Motorcycle Week and from the people it draws and put nothing back into it yourself. That, to me, is what is unacceptable. And there's got to be a way for all of us working together to be able to find a means for all of us pulling together and building the rally back up again. So, having said that, we'll move on. Thank you.
Well said.
Yep.
Agree.
We are now at citizens' request to comment on current agenda items. Is there anyone in our audience tonight who wishes to address the council on any matter that is somewhere on tonight's agenda? Now is the time. Somewhere on tonight's agenda. Mr. St. Clair.
Thank you. I know you're going to be talking about the zoning or the commercial resort area of Route 3 from the bridge north. And I know there's going to be a lot of work put in that by a lot of hardworking people. I just hope for the most part it's left alone, that it remains commercial resort. Certainly there are different things that we as a community probably would not want to have up there, and certainly some of the people that live and work up in that area would probably have a short list or a long list. But for the basic commercial resort area like Weirs Boulevard is remaining now, I hope that Route 3 North remains basically set up like it is now, and that there are no major changes that just sweep either all potential residents out of the area or all potential businesses out of that area, future ones. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else like to address council on anything that is on tonight's agenda? Okay, we'll move on to committees, and I believe, Councilor Doyle, we have a need to schedule Is that correct, a meeting of government operations and ordinances?
For the noise ordinance update.
Oh, yep.
On the item B, review of Chapter 167 noise and Chapter 161 licensing as it pertains to outdoor sound equipment and loudspeakers.
Okay, we can do that. Our September meeting is what, the 14th?
14th and 28th, yes.
Okay, should we?
14th and 27th, I'm sorry.
28.
Is that right?
28th.
No, I'm
28th.
sorry.
So,
Oh, I'm at the wrong month there, sorry. Calendar goes backwards. Yes, 14th and 28th.
so we can do that at 6 o'clock that morning, or, I'm sorry, 6 o'clock that evening? Not in the morning, yeah. On the 14th,
6
yep.
o'clock on the 14th. This would be Councilors Doyle, Bolduc, and Bounds. Is that okay with you?
Yeah.
Okay. Do we need to vote on that?
I think if you just acknowledge it, and we'll make sure it's properly posted, we'd be all set.
All right, so we'll schedule a meeting of the Government Operations and Ordinances Committee consisting of Councilors Doyle, Bolduc, and Bounds for 6 p.m. on September 14th. And the issue at hand at that meeting is a review of the noise ordinance and the licensing as it pertains to sound equipment and loudspeaker ordinance, those two items related. Any other committee business we need to discuss tonight? Liaison reports. Councilor Hamel.
Yes, I do have one. This involves the joint building committee between the council and the high school. As you know, they had a remainder after they finished the Hewitt Center and some of the projects there. There was a remainder of roughly $164,968 from the QZAB bond. And the joint building committee was working on other projects at the schools. That was done this summer, and those projects have been completed. The JBC committee has been officially, I guess, dissolved, and the official word is that the schoolhouse has been returned to the school. That's how you end it. Anyway, to report on what was done there, and it's quite remarkable. If you get a chance, you ought to go over and take a look at the mathematic wing at the high school. It involved a total of 12 classrooms. 8 were completely demolished and redone. They'd done sheetrock, they did heating system modifications, obviously demolitions, new ceilings, new whiteboards, new electrical lighting, refinished all the floors. They added shades, the sprinkler systems, which were installed on the original QZAB bonds. The heads were dropped to the proper levels. They replaced heating controls on the old systems that were pneumatic, and they went to electronic controls because the pneumatic functions weren't working properly. They installed safety rails in the gym on the bleachers, which didn't have any, which were dangerous, and they made them handicap accessible with the railings and stuff. The basketball hoops during a game or whatever, the ones over the bleachers were slowly coming down, so that wasn't a good thing. So those systems are being replaced. There's new lifts going in. They're looking at the auditorium. That was one area that there wasn't quite enough money to do, but they're looking to replace the lighting because during some of the shows the lights go on and off, and that's something that they're looking into. They didn't quite have enough money in their budget, so that's something for in the future. But as of right now, with what the school district also budgeted, the total project came to $222,973. And like I said, you need to go take a look at this, because those rooms, you walk in them, they look like the junior high right now. They're amazing. They really look nice.
And they're located where?
The old building.
They're in the, if you're looking at the school, it's the older building to the right, above where the shops are, the wood shops and all that there. It's upstairs there. It's worth going and see. They did a beautiful job in there.
I think that was the Mechanical Arts Building once upon a time.
Yep.
It was first built,
Yep.
right?
So, anyway, that's what went on with JBC over the summer. Spent a lot of time on that.
Okay, great, thank you. Any other liaison reports? Okay, the city manager's report. Mr. Myers.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Included for the second meeting of the month, you have the project updates. As you can imagine, a lot of construction projects have been full swing. So the area up by the hospital, Avery Street, Batchelder, Tyler, Dixon, had significant work with sewer, water, natural gas, drainage, and the base course of asphalt went down on it, I believe, last Thursday. We'll let that sit for a few weeks, and we'll raise the structures and do the final coat sometime in September. The Gateway project coming in to the downtown in conjunction with the Main Street Bridge project is really taking shape. Some final waterproofing membrane on the bridge and paving. We're still working out the final details. It's a very involved process and time-consuming, and we're working through a few things and hope to have some information on the specifics and the date there, hopefully by tomorrow. A couple of people and groups have stepped up to kind of do some adopt spots down there. Mr. Robert Sawyer, who's here tonight, is going to help out the city and maintain some of the garden area in front of Sawyer Jewelers. The Peachy Garden Club is going to step up and take care of the center island garden in there. We're probably going to look to wait a couple of weeks to plant the big planters down there just because it's warm season. If we wait until 1st of September ballpark, we'll probably do some mums, but everyone's coordinating efforts, so everything will be uniform down there. We've installed irrigation where it's appropriate for those gardens, and in the sodded area on the face of the Grace Capital Church side of the parking garage, so that there's irrigation and things are going to be kept green. The bridge railing is complete, the bump outs, the ornamental lighting, so it's really coming together very nicely down there. And over the next few weeks, you'll see the kind of the final punch list items go in and take shape there as well. And the area on Water Street Extension and Pleasant Street, where the Water Department made a significant water main upgrade last fall. Prior to that, we had some significant drainage issues there, and the sidewalk was all broken up. So we have final designs in hand now that we are fast-tracking for plantings, handling the drainage. We had a real nice public showing for a meeting we held to present the concept plans back in the middle of July. A couple of minor items, relatively speaking, that there was a lot of agreement to tweak. We have done that, and we're looking forward to get that rolling so that it is also done this construction season, and then we'll be out of the downtown. There'll be no fatigue or hangover into next spring. We're trying to do a different project again.
The drainage program isn't part of the bridge.
No, if you want to.
So I was wondering about the funding.
Well, the knob piece, if you will, when we made Main Street southbound in Phase 4 of the project, that was part of the bridge project. So where you see the new tip down in the sidewalk, and we left some green area, or what will be green area, it's just dirt now, that was part of the Main Street project. The rest of it is not. So the Water Department has contributed some in-kind funds. They did some more extensive paving in that area rather than just the trench patching that was supposed to be there. Part of the project we're looking to utilize out of either sidewalk funds or drainage funds, a combination that's within the operating budget because that's what they're intended use for. We're looking at the final dollar amount on the cost of the Gateway project, and we believe there'll be some funds remaining from that. We want to do the final tally on that, but if we were to request to use some remaining funds that were not needed there for this, we'll be bringing that to the council's attention.
What is the cost of that project?
Ballpark, we haven't gotten bids on it yet, but, so I probably don't want to tip the hand too much as to what we expect it is without the bids coming in, but happy to share it with you at the next meeting. Actually came in, we anticipated it'll come in less than what was first presented to you back when we were talking about this as being a TIF project.
Well, a couple of years ago when we did the TIF project and we gave quite a bit of money out of the TIF fund, this was one particular, was noted as a pocket park, and it was voted down by the council. So I'm just wondering, where the funds were going to come from.
It's definitely been scaled back from the original concept. There was talk about doing a small performing area. Comments were received as we have the area at Rotary Park, so we don't really need another big performance area. There was a desire to put some kind of a touchable water element into that area, but it's definitely scaled back. Regardless of doing the plantings and doing some enhancement with some benches, that area was torn up with the water project, and additionally, all of that concrete was broken down, and it was not a good draining area to begin with. So some of these were dedicated funds that would have gone for those purposes to begin with, and the feeling was we've done some nice work elsewhere in the downtown and spruce it up. So we'll bring you the final tally, but it's going to come from a couple of different pockets of money. I do believe we will have some money left from the Gateway project that once we kind of close the books on that, so to speak, I'll be coming to you as well. But I think you'll be very pleased with where the cost is projected to come and the outcome of the project.
It was very good looking.
Yes. One final thing that's not in your project update tonight, I just want to give a shout out to all city departments who were involved. We had a significant rain event. It'll be 2 weeks tomorrow night where we had I don't know, outburst, something happened here that just kind of hung over Laconia and the surrounding towns, where we got several inches of rain in a very short period of time, and a lot of the departments from Public Works, Parks and Rec, Police, Fire, really responded and helped out our infrastructure, helped out business owners, helped out individual property owners on some case-by-case basis in the middle of it. So certainly an unexpected, unplanned rain event, but we got some great departments who stepped up and offered a lot of assistance to people that night and the following day. So I just want to mention that to you, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for the manager? Wow, you get off easy tonight, sir. Okay, we're on to new business. We have 2 items of new business tonight. The first is a request for the council approval for sale of a tax-deeded property as a, quote, unique property. You have a memorandum for the manager dated August 24th in your packet, and I will recognize Mr. Myers.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So we've attached the background for you on the way the city normally would go about disposing of a tax deeded properly. If we are looking to vary from that method, it would need the vote of the city council. So this particular property, we've attached a photo for you, is a trailer on a trailer park, a privately owned trailer park. Not a lot of value to it. Back taxes going back for, I believe, since 2009 on it. By law, the owner of the trailer park is not allowed to move the trailer once we have deeded it, so that needs to sit on the lot, and therefore it's not producing income for the owner of the trailer park. So in discussions with the city, the owner of the park has offered to purchase it solely, or pay the back taxes, in essence, take the deed to it, solely for the purpose of being able to move it off the lot and get an income-producing trailer on the unit for the property owner. The city has agreed to work and has looked to abate some of the back interest on that to help make this work for everybody involved. And then obviously the intent would be to get something there that is property tax paying, so the city benefits going forward. So that's the background on why we're not looking to go the traditional route. Even with an affirmative vote tonight, we still would need to post it for 90 days, and it's my understanding that the prior owner, the one who we did the tax deed from, would have 90 days to come in and pay off everything and take ownership of it. We do not think that's a likely scenario, but we would have to await that because that's in state law. And I'm happy to answer any other questions you may have.
Any questions? Okay, so what exactly do we need to pass in the way of a motion?
I think if you pass a motion to...
I move that the property is of a unique characteristic and should not be sold in the manner outlined in Section 183-3 of the City Code, but instead should be sold to the owners of the Singing Cove Campground for $5,059.38, the amount of back taxes owed. Does that do it?
Perfect.
Well said. Do you have that, Ms. Reynolds? She has that. Second by Councilor Doyle? Okay, we have a motion on the floor by Councilor Bounds, a second by Councilor Doyle. Any discussion? All those in favor of adopting that motion, please raise a hand. Vote is 6 affirmative votes, and that motion passes unanimously.
I'm sure they'll be glad to get that out of there.
Still got to wait the 90 days, but yes, that'll be a welcome relief to them.
Okay, the second item of new business is discussion regarding Weir zoning. Give some background for audience's sake here and to remind council that back in June, we had before us a proposal forwarded from the Laconia Planning Board that suggested a number of changes to the city zoning ordinance as it pertained to the Weirs Beach area. And there were two parts to that. One was a call for a rezoning of a large section of Weirs Boulevard itself from commercial resort to shorefront residential. And there was also recommendation from the planning board to make a number of changes to the table of uses regarding land primarily in the commercial resort zone. And to refresh everyone's memory, we had a number of citizens that night testify in opposition to specifically to the zoning change on Weirs Boulevard, which the council voted down. I don't believe we even got to the subject of the table of uses that night during that lengthy meeting. So at that point in time, at the conclusion of that meeting, we sort of made a promise to ourselves to revisit this subject once we got through budget season, which we are now past, and therefore that's why this is back on our agenda tonight. Now, the last time that this came up, you'll recall, in response in 2014 to a controversy over the Zoning Board of Adjustment turning down an application for a special exception to operate a small used car dealership on Weirs Boulevard, and the controversy that was in the wake of that decision, that we passed a motion asking the planning board to revisit, or not revisit, to visit, if you would, the general issue of zoning in the Weirs Beach area of the city, and to come back to the council with recommendations. And as I understand it, the planning board actually turned over the work involved in that request on our part to the zoning task force, which consists of members, if I understand it correctly, of the planning board, some members of the zoning board, and some other citizen volunteers. And they looked into the issue thoroughly, and that recommendation that came to us that night was from that zoning task force, which then came back to the planning board, which approved it and passed it back on to us. As we all know, and perhaps some of our audience don't know, only the city council can make changes to the city zoning ordinance. So what was discussed in June was having a general discussion about zoning at the Weirs among the city council members so that we could pass on more specific requests to the planning board in terms of what kind of general thinking we have as a board, or at least what general thinking members of the board have as to what, if any, ideas or considerations we would like to see with regard to zoning in the Weirs Beach area. So that's our purpose tonight, and so I'm hoping for and expecting a rather freewheeling discussion on that general subject. It is not our purpose tonight to revisit, and I think this is important, it is not our purpose tonight to revisit necessarily the proposal that was before us in June. If any council member wants to revisit that proposal, obviously it would be germane, but that's not the main topic of conversation, nor is our conversation tonight limited to simply talking about Weirs Boulevard. We're talking about all the land in what is generally considered to be the Weirs Beach section of the city, which would run all the way from the Margate up to and including the Meredith Town Line. Okay? So who would like to start? Don't be shy. Mr. Doyle, you represent a good part of that. Do you have any?
Well, I actually had a conversation with Shanna today. I called her about a lot of this, just to get some definitions, clarifications, whatever, and make sure I understood what was going on. And because lots of different places in there we see, outside storage, but it's depends upon, as she explained to me, whether it was commercial or residential, just like greenhouses, for instance, is being changed to make it easier for a resident to have a greenhouse, as opposed to having to jump through hoops to get it done. To start out with, I think that what some of these changes that are proposed are a good place to start. I do think there'll probably need to be.
So you're looking at the table of uses now
I'm
in
looking
terms
at
of
the
what
table
was
of uses,
recommended?
yes, yes. I don't think we need to change any zoning. I think the zoning itself is fine where it is. I think it's what's allowed in those zones is what we need to address. I know a number of years ago, there was discussion from a lot of people that lived in the Weirs, and one of the things that we specifically did not want was for this zone, for lack of a better word, this zone to be a dumping ground for things that were not allowed elsewhere. Don't just stick them in the Weirs just because nobody else wants them, because it has to have a home. Don't make that their home just because, as a failure to do it somewhere else.
There was a feeling that was happening?
There was, actually, a long time ago. I think that certainly, for instance, allowing a bed and breakfast as a permitted use without any type of conditional use is a no-brainer, simply because it's a tourist area. I think, and this is where it gets a little tricky, sexually oriented business. I had an interesting conversation today with Shanna on that one, because apparently the definition is in itself very explicit. And
we'll let you handle that one.
Yeah, I know. And with that said, it was also, as I had questioned her, if a business, now that would actually, one thing that would fall into that too would be basically like X-rated films at the drive-in movie theater would not be allowed to be showed, which, I have no problem with that, but I do think it's something that, I have no problem with being excluded, but I think it's something that people do need to be able to voice an opinion on. I was also assured that, that there could probably be something in this, in the event someone wanted to bring in a show, for instance, some sort of I heard the other day, for instance, the Chippendale dancers, or a special show that they were producing in one of their clubs, that could maybe be a permit that they could apply for, to do like every 3 months or every 6 months or an occasional type of thing. I think.
So we have questions about what the definition of sexually oriented business is.
Well, I've been informed. It's not necessarily.
You have, huh?
It's not necessarily something I'd like to broadcast at the moment, but I don't think it's something that, I think that where they're proposing it to be, possibly, especially where the airport, A1, Airport Industrial, I don't think anybody would find that a bad spot to put them. I cannot necessarily speak as to the commercial area, because the commercial area, if I'm reading it correctly, has some residences in there too, doesn't it? The commercial zone that runs along Union Avenue also has some residences in there, and I don't necessarily, and I know that there's also some things for, at least in the Weirs, I know that there's some restrictions that are deeded to the property, like within so many feet of a church, within so many feet of a daycare center, so many feet of a school. You can't have some of these things anyway.
So they recommended changing sexually oriented business from a permitted use to a prohibited use.
Yes, yes.
And so what's your bottom line on that?
Well, I mean, I I think that we need to put this out there and hear from other people. My own personal opinion, I think that's great. But I can't speak without hearing from other people, and this is, I think we need to get some feedback.
So that's something could be vetted at a public hearing.
Yes, I think that's something that because, it also goes with that whole not in my backyard kind of thing. You don't want it in your backyard, but it's okay to throw it there. And I think that the people we're throwing it to maybe should discuss it too. Or the people that possibly want to open that type of business in that corridor. I just think we need to have this open and above board. I'm wondering with a nightclub / dance hall, that would be a special exception. And I think we maybe need to think a little bit more about that, especially if
which is permitted now.
It's permitted now, and we're looking at a special exception now. I mean, I think that, I think we're going to need some serious thought on that one, too, because we're going to be opening up that Pandora's box, or that box of worms, or however you want to phrase it, of dealing with noise issues. I think the two go hand in hand, nightclubs, dance halls, noise issues. So I think that's going to be something that we really need to put some serious thought into, changing it from permitted to
prohibited?
No, to special exception, because you also have the flip side of there's businesses out there, and the more entertainment that there is out there brings more business, but we need to move carefully on it, as to where it's going to be and where would it, and possibly conditions that would need to go along with those permits. The soundproofing or hours, or I don't know. That's not. I'm not an expert on that. I just think that there's going to need to be some serious thought put into there. I think a lot of the storage, the proposed things that are proposed, those changes I think are fine. I'm certainly fine with the whole non-automotive things, dealerships, sales and service.
Proposed changing vehicle dealership sales and service from permitted by special exception to
not permitted.
Prohibited.
And, agricultural, livestock, I mean, that's certainly special exception that could go in. I mean, the fact that it's pulled from a permitted use to special exception, there again, we maybe need to get some public input on it. It's my 2 cents.
Anyone else? Councilor Hamlin.
I guess part of my question is these maps that we got, Shannon. These here, is this what you're suggesting?
Let me see.
These what we just got?
Those are maps.
the old
Those are
ones.
maps having to do with what we discussed in June.
Okay, but this
That's
isn't
not a
coming
current
back
proposal.
to...
No.
Okay, that's what I was wondering. Thank you. No, I agree with Ava on these. So the red column is what you're looking to change right now?
Those are the changes that were recommended to us in June that we didn't address.
Okay.
Councilor Baird, do you have?
Well, I agree with a lot of what Ava had to say. Do you know how many sexually oriented places we have now?
I don't know that there's any other
We don't have any?
than a shop. I think that there is a shop that the back room maybe has some sexually explicit things, and I don't know that would be,
What kind of
I don't even know if that would,
What are you talking about, a shop?
a storefront, a
There used to
retail
be a
establishment.
so-called adult bookstore up there. I don't know whether it's still there or not.
I believe it's still, yeah.
It was downtown at one point in
Yes,
time. and then it
that's the
moved.
same one. That's the same one.
Now, on that list of permitted uses that they're going to change, sexually oriented business in C-zone used to be permitted. It is now down as by exception. I thought you had said no.
Well, commercial resort is different from the C-zone. C-zone runs in Union Avenue, and commercial resort is primarily all of the weirs. So it'd be moving, that's why I think we need to really have a discussion on that, because we don't really, is it fair to move it from,
Right.
to dump it in another
Yeah,
neighborhood?
right.
Without input from people,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah. I think it's hard for me to make a decision on what should be where until, like you say, somebody that is living there and works there, to get input from the public. Because it's easy for somebody sitting here to say, this is what I want, but there are,
But it's a-
I just want to
But
listen.
it's a great place to start. I mean, this is a great place to start and say,
I will
let's go.
point out that the planning board held a public hearing on these uses back in June that no one came to.
But there's a good chance they may come to this next one.
So it's not that they haven't been vetted. They
Right.
were vetted before, and
Is this something that, to be looked at, can be referred to a committee, or is that not?
well, that's what'll happen. Is
yeah.
it'll be referred to the planning board, who will refer it to the zoning task force, and then they'll report back to the planning board, which will report back to us. I'm ready to go to Counselor Lippman first.
Council Bullock go first, because he's
Okay.
from that district.
Well, this is all new to all of us here tonight. We have to have a meeting with the public here that live over there, for them to give us their input as to all of this stuff. I don't want to do like we did the last time, come at that meeting at night to accept everything that they wanted, and then, it just blew up. I think the people there have to be notified about this, so that they can look at it and come to our work session or whatever we're going to have on this item.
Well, that's what we're doing tonight, unless we change course, which we could certainly do.
They'll all be notified so that they,
But by us or by the planning board?
by the planning board.
Okay, well, typically, the public hearing would be held, or at least the first public hearing would be held by the planning board, not by the council. Then we can either accept their hearing as our own or have our own. Councilor Lippman?
I'd like to approach this a little differently in terms of, more thematically, in terms of how zoning is working. I think, from the feedback that we got before and just thinking about sort of the long-term development of the weirs, thematically, we heard that the hotel and basically facilities that accommodate people, visitors, were concerned about being, if you will, losing their ability to expand. So I think thematically, I think we want a set of zoning, if in fact the business climate supports the expansion of a quality resort area. I think we want to make sure that we're not carving this up into so many uses that we're eliminating that from happening. And I think at the end of the day that, with probably a few exceptions, I think the thing that we want to have happen is to have people put property into productive use that adds to the economic well-being of the area, as opposed to just getting so prescriptive that, we're just, thwarting development, if you will, by being so limited. So I guess I would like to, think that what we'd like to see happen in this zoning area and others is that the natural productive growth that comes out of people who are willing to invest in the community is not thwarted by our zoning rules and regulations, so long as that can be done in a way that doesn't take away from the property rights of the people that are already there. I mean, that I think is in a nutshell what we'd like to do. And what we heard from the first proposal is that was thwarting existing people's right. It was boxing them in from being able to grow their business if they saw fit. I'm not a zoning expert by any means, but I think that tourism is something that we're trying to promote for the for the area, and this is obviously an area that has a competitive niche in the tourist area, and balancing those competing demands, in terms of whether it be a nightclub or some other entertainment. If I think, sorry, from Proctor, see you out in the audience there, but I mean, you guys talk about selling sleep. If it's going to take away from being able to sell sleep, then it's probably not a good thing, even if it's in a permitted zone, that you can do
But
that.
we just need to, we just really need to put some thought into that part.
Right. So I guess I'd be, in terms of a public hearing on the part of the council, I'd like to get some sense of what people who are interested in developing that area are interested in doing, and try to thematically create zones that allow that to happen, and if it doesn't happen over time, to reconsider that. I don't know if that makes sense to anybody else, but did
Makes sense
Want
to
to make
me.
sure they know and
I
they're
would,
here to tell us what they want to see up there.
I would like to swim against the current a little bit here on this subject, in the sense that one of the things that came out of the so-called EPA consultant report some years ago and whatnot was questioning whether or not all of that land that's currently blue on the map, considered commercial resort, really should be in the same zone or not, and that we should take a look at that. And I'm particularly interested in that, and I'll tell you why. I don't have an agenda here in the sense of a set position, yes or no, but I think we're at sort of a crossroads for a significant portion of the Weirs Beach area, and now is the appropriate time to stop and take a look at what effect our regulations and whatnot might have on development there. And I'm speaking specifically about Endicott Street north from the Weirs Channel Bridge to the Meredith Town line. And I think we all know that there are considerable tracts of land on both sides of the road in that stretch that are either underdeveloped or not developed at all at this point in time. And so it's not like there's only no land left for development at Weirs Beach. There's considerable land along Route 3 there from the bridge to Meredith. That's a prospect for development. And I'm not sure in my own mind that if you look at your map, particularly in the green areas there, you'll note, for example, along Weirs Boulevard, along White Oaks Road, along Meredith Center Road, along Parade Road, we have divided the land not into one zone but two zones, meaning that the land immediately adjacent to the highways in each of those cases, or the main roads, is a different zone from the land that's back off the road. And I think that possibly makes some sense, and would make some sense at the Weirs as well. And in particular, I have one concern that I would like to see us stop and think about, and see the planning board and the zoning task force stop and think about. And that is, right now, all of that land is zoned for commercial and residential. And clearly, in the Weirs Beach area of the city, the momentum is on the side of residential, not commercial, in terms of development in recent years. So all of that land right now could be developed tomorrow for housing, and none of it could be commercial. And I think that's what we need to stop and think about, if that's acceptable to us in terms of the future of the city. And if not, perhaps we should be taking a look at whether we want all of that land on Route 3 to be developed residentially. And I'm not talking about all the land at Weirs Beach area. I'm simply talking about the road frontage land, how many feet back from the frontage you want, whether or not we ought to be reserving that land, at least on the early floors, if you're talking about multi-floor structures, to commercial development as opposed to residential development. Councilor Bounce.
I don't think you're swimming too much against the current here, and I think that Councilor Lippman's remarks, along with Councilor Doyle's remarks, are consistent with what I think everybody here would like to do, and that is create an environment that encourages healthy development over the long term, that says to developers, Laconia is a place to come build residential units. It's a place to come build commercial units. It's a place that can house all these needs. My concerns are more that, and I don't want anybody to take this as being critical. It's kind of like we've been reactive instead of proactive about how we're going about this whole process. I mean, what drove us to pass the request to the planning board in the beginning, back in October of 2014, was a single issue. And that had come up the council meeting beforehand as addressing that through that single issue, which we then sort of made into a more general request about how to go about it. What drives people is sometimes the outspoken reaction that some citizens have to what the planning board does, or what the zoning board does, or maybe what commissions may do from time to time. And I think that we got to listen to what the complaints are. We've got to figure out a strategy to deal with their complaints, what the real problem is, if there are real complaints. But overall, we take a process that says we want to encourage growth, but we want to do it in a responsible way that's good for everybody in the city of Laconia, such as just going ahead and flipping the recreational uses or the sexual orientated uses without really having an idea of what impact we're going to have in the neighborhood that it's in, or the neighborhood that we're going to permit it to go in. And as I think I've said consistently all along, we have a process for this, and we're in the middle of it. I know that some members of the council think that it's going slowly, and it is, but by its nature, it goes slowly. We're looking at a draft or some kind of progress with respect to the master plan, which is going to address the zoning issues in the first instance and how we should manage our property. And it should be addressing your concerns with respect to how the undeveloped land up at the Weirs has remained undeveloped for a long time, not being put into any use at all. So if we're going to send this back to the planning board, I think we ought to be mindful of the fact that the recommendations that Ava went over so carefully came in the context of a whole zoning change to shorefront residential, and they might not be appropriate to the commercial uses that we want to put them to now, and changes to the thing. So I want to ask the question again. Do we want to tackle the commercial uses at the Weirs in the commercial resort zone at this point in time, and whatever the council says is fine with me? Or do we want to wait until we've gone through the charrette that we're going to do on this coming weekend, that I'm going to miss, by the way, but that's okay, and that we've got some recommendations that are citywide in terms of where are we going from 2015 to 2016 on? What's our vision? What do we want to do with the city of Laconia? Because right now, it's an exciting time here. At least that's my view. we've got projects going on in downtown Laconia, we've got the Colonial Theater, we've got a lot of projects that are ongoing. The applications before the planning board have kind of slowed down right now, but there's been a lot of activity over this year with respect to developers coming in. And I like to think that the planning board and the zoning board are really friendly places for citizens to come to get results, and that's mostly what occurs most of the time. And you're always going to have some problems from time to time with separate issues. So I, like Henry, want to think long-term. I want to think in creating an atmosphere of growth.
Realistically, maybe you can't answer this, I don't know, I know I can't answer it. If we were to wait, we're talking specifically about Weirs Beach at this point in time, but if we were to wait for the master plan to be completed, to base any possible zoning changes on it, how long will we have to wait?
At least a year, maybe more.
If I can answer that real quickly, the land use chapter and the economics chapter.
Shanna Sanders, City Planning Director.
Yep, land use chapter, economics chapter should be fairly complete by the spring. We then have the transportation chapter, the cultural and historic resources chapter, the natural resources chapter that we will be finishing for the remainder of the summer and into the fall of 2016.
And it's,
What did you say about the land use chapter?
Land use chapter and economics chapter should be nearly complete by the spring. So we
Nearly
would have a much better idea moving forward.
So if we put this off till April 1st, we would have a much better idea.
Yes, I believe.
Councilor Lippman?
I think there's a middle ground between those two approaches. I think it'd be good for us to do some work to get some conceptual sense of the thematic development potentials, and that might be informative to the process that Shanna just described. And, you know, I think there's a piece of it that's technical, which is certainly within the zoning, you know, but I think what we're really trying to do here is develop some policy and, you know, in terms of what the mayor was talking about and, you know, some broad strokes of things. I think that we're capable of working on that a bit and
At the same, parallel paths.
at a parallel path level, and, you know, to convert it into a technical procedure to implement, I think that's appropriate at a zoning level.
I really don't have a problem with that in terms of doing it on two fronts in that nature, because they're going to track together fairly well in terms of how the process is going. I don't want to slow down the master plan so we can address specific commercial uses in the commercial resort zone. But I don't have a problem with putting it on a parallel track because they'll meld together pretty well in terms of the final resolution. I just want to be clear that the directive or the request that we make of the planning board is consistent with Henry's kind of view of what it is we want to be doing to encourage development, consistent with your question about is there a different way to zone the land up in the weirs along Route 3, and consistent with some of the observations you've made about how careful we need to be about our review of this. Because remember, I say it again, these recommended uses came with shorefront residential change, and they may or may not be entirely appropriate for a commercial resort. And I think that we're all agreed.
You lost me on that one.
Pardon?
You lost me on that last point. These came with shorefront residential?
Yes, the uses
At the same time, you mean?
Yeah, they came in conjunction. The use change came in with the recommendation that we change it to shorefront residential. They were tied together. in terms of their consideration. And it may be,
Well, but all of these changes that came to us have to do with the commercial resort zone, not the shorefront residential zone.
yes, but they were tied together when they came as a package from the planning board and from the zoning task force. They were tied together. So they may or may not be appropriate for commercial resort. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Oh.
Okay, I'm going to say it once more, and then I'm going to quit, all right?
They were based on the premise of the shorefront residential.
That's right. They were based on the premise of the shorefront residential. The change in uses were based upon the proposed shorefront residential use.
No, they weren't.
Yes, they were.
These were, can you come up and explain this? There were two separate proposals. One was to change a large stretch of land to shorefront residential along Weirs Boulevard. And then there were a bunch of changes suggested primarily to the commercial resort zone that didn't have anything to do, to my understanding, with shorefront residential.
So when the planning board and the ZTF took a look at the use chart, it was with the understanding that those changes would be in place with Weirs Boulevard being changed to shorefront residential. That's how they looked at it. So the fact that Weirs Boulevard will not change to shorefront residential and will be commercial
Would
resort.
impact this?
Would impact the changes on the entire chart, yes.
So this was done with the presumption that Weirs Boulevard would become shorefront residential?
Correct. We looked at it as if that area would be fully residential in those uses and that the majority of commercial businesses would be up in the remaining commercial resort area. So we would like the opportunity to relook at that, knowing,
But you didn't change the housing permits in commercial resort at all?
no,
Okay.
nope.
In other words, if the idea was to have residential development along Weirs Boulevard and commercial development along Route 3.
That's correct.
North of the bridge.
Yep.
Then you didn't address that at all in these, because every form of residential that was permitted before is still permitted in the commercial resort zone.
Yep. Again, I think what we were looking at is a more of a separation between commercial and residential, with really trying to encourage more commercial development up in the remaining blue and encourage more residential in the.
Was there any discussion then about limiting residential development in CR?
No, the discussion was more about limiting or encouraging commercial development in each one of those zones. So now that we've got a much more mixed-use zone, I think we'd like to relook at the commercial and where it's permitted in a much bigger context.
Councilor Lippman?
I think a strength of the city, in terms from an economic standpoint, is our ability to reconcile mixed use in a number of different areas in the city, and I think the economic diversity that you were sort of describing that you want to encourage, I think, again, is another thematic kind of thing that we want to accomplish, and it should be flexible enough to organically let it develop based on what is
market force,
what works. And so, for example, some of the development that's going on right now on
Scenic
is, eventually that's going to probably organically, that they've got, some places where people who live in those condos, have their own private stuff, but eventually they're going to want to get out from where they're living to see and participate in other things, and that's,
And that will drive more commercial development.
Right.
Correct,
So I
yep.
think that the balance of what's happening is kind of, you got to allow for some organic development of it, and then you also, I think, it's fairly compact in that the mixed use, being able to finesse mixed use is a good thing. I mean, I think, I think of like O'Shea Industrial Park next to a residential area, or Lakes Business Park next to a residential area. We've been able to pull off those things in a way that I think's added value to both.
I mean, I think going back to Ava's point, the question, the Weirs, is how to mix the we sell noise with the we sell sleep. It's not necessarily industrial and residential here, it's more entertainment and residential that we need to meld, so.
Right, but I guess my point is a business in of itself whether it's in this industry or that housing or whatever, it's how they go about building it and developing that makes a difference. I mean, if you put a big investment into containing the noise and making it compatible with your neighbor, we ought to be open to that as opposed to just saying, ruling something in or out. I think we should, the quality of the proposal is what should drive the zoning.
Counselor Hamel.
I kind of had an idea of what I was going to suggest to the planning board, but after hearing this, and everybody had a great explanation, I don't know what to ask them now. I still go back to that meeting we had
That's right.
that night, where a lot of businesses that have been there for a long time were worried about what they could do in the future. In my mind, that's what I don't want to jeopardize, is those businesses that have been there, their opportunity, like Henry said, to expand or whatever. I don't know if I'm as much as in favor of changing the zones, but what the mayor said makes sense on, strips and then the outer part of the land. But I guess a question I have is, on the commercial resort along the boulevard, and then you've got the residential along White Oaks Road. Now, there's been huge residential developments, like, was it Greenview, or is it Greenview or Crestview? Or
Evergreen.
Evergreen. I mean, that's a huge residential. Do you consider that commercial?
No.
Okay, so that's residential. There's another huge piece of property towards the end of White Oaks Road where a lot of homes have been built. Some are, I think it's closed gate, but I'm not sure. It's up behind,
August Woods?
yeah, that's it. Now, that's residential?
Correct.
Okay. Now, there's another huge one that's looking to go in across from Christmas Island.
Langley Cove?
Yep. Now, those are all in this commercial area. Is it, so why doesn't the planning board reset these lines between commercial and residential, where these areas that are in the commercial have taken over as residential? So why can't these be reset down and encompass where these places are?
I believe that's what we were trying to do.
See, I'm talking along here. This is where a lot of the residential,
That's what they were proposing that we voted against.
I'm not saying along the boulevard. I'm saying
We're talking about a
the
very
back-
narrow
the-
swath along the
the
boulevard.
back. In other words, it's creeping from White Oaks Road in, down. So why can't you encompass those areas that are now built or future built as residential, and then along the boulevard can remain?
So he's suggesting a corridor along Weirs Boulevard, similar to what we were talking about in the
Well,
other areas.
it's like I said, it's coming down mostly from White Oaks Road.
The Summit, is that the name of that big one up
Yep.
toward the end? So
Yep,
the
yep.
Summit and Evergreen and places like that would be zone residential, but the boulevard itself would not.
Because, with that hill there, unless they want to build a ski area, I don't think there's going to be a lot of commercial going up into there.
Yep, agreed, yep.
So, to me, that part of that coming down off of White Oaks, I mean, you could change that to,
Where are you talking about exactly?
He's talking about the dividing line
Right here.
between green and blue,
Right in here.
here, between White Oaks Road and Weirs
I mean, there's a
Boulevard.
lot of residential building going on there now, and I'm sure into the future. What is it, that one's got, what, like 300 homes you're looking to put in up there? The new one that they're
I'm sorry,
talking about?
yeah.
In other words, what he's questioning is, why is the line between green and blue drawn where it is now?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think in response to that, it's definitely something we can look into. Residential is allowed in both zones. The green is rural residential, 2-acre minimum, so it's a much
okay.
less dense.
Yeah. These are cluster, basically, right, the others?
And the residential that's allowed on Weirs Boulevard is 6 units per acre, so it's a much more dense
So what he's really suggesting is a band of yellow between green and blue.
Pretty soon we'll have the Italian flag, won't we?
We're designing a flag here, yes.
But So anyway, that's just something that I was looking at where it's mostly residential up in here, up in the upper part of it, type thing. But anyway, I think what's important too is re-looking at this up there. I mean, that's kind of what I thought was, going to happen. But then, like David said, well, if we change one here, it might drive it over there or whatever.
Well,
but I mean, you got to start somewhere.
Counselor, what happened with me was that I sat down and spent a fair amount of time doing just exactly that. And then, but in the back of my mind, I'm thinking, well, these uses apply to the entire zone. And I'm thinking, well, maybe I think that would be a good idea in one part of the zone, but not a good idea in a different part of the zone.
Yeah.
As opposed to one size fits all. And so the other way of getting around that is to make everything a special exception. And I really don't like that.
I don't either.
Because I think if we learned anything from the episode in 2014 is that we ought to be trying to limit the number of things that require a special exception as much as possible, because it invites controversy. It invites conflict between neighbors and whatnot to say, well, you get it, but I don't, in the same zone. And if it was up to me, I would try to restrict the number of things that are permitted by special exception. I'd rather just say yes or no.
I agree.
Than encourage spot zoning.
So where are we?
My comment, I'd like to comment on that, because it's really, I don't think, a good policy to do away with things like variance and special exceptions and those kinds of criteria, because that really encourages the use of property in ways that are creative and doesn't allow the use of property in ways that are, I'll call it destructive, that's probably not the right word, but in ways that don't promote the neighborhood. You need to have these criteria, these special exceptions. You can't be looking to duck a controversy. You just can't. You need special exceptions, you need variances, you need a method that a developer can utilize to be creative before the planning board or the zoning board, where there's a factory here, but here's what I can do with this piece of property that's right next to it, that's not quite within the definitions. And that's just my comment. You are going to invite controversy. That's what we do on the city council.
Councilor Lippman.
No, I agree with what David just said. That being said, though, I think what we could do in the short run is I think it'd be good if we could devote a piece of our meeting to invite people to come forward to kind of lay out some vision for the development of it, and we'll hear the varying competing interests. I know that but not to do it in this prescribed, C and E and P and N, and, just to get more of a conceptual view of how, various people have an economic stake in the area, see it, as well as some people who might not even be there yet.
I thought that's what I said. Let the people come to us and tell us what they want to see.
I'm agreeing with you, Armin, but I think how we ask them to come to us, though, is we get one set of minutia that's not really in our wheelhouse of expertise, okay?
I know, that's what I'm saying.
More of a big picture kind of thing.
Yeah, and going back to what David said, there's a lot of land out there that's not used. Granted, it is, but somebody owns that land, and if they don't want to sell it, then it's going to sit
They
there.
don't want to do anything with it, they don't have to.
That's right.
That's right.
It would be good
But
to...
every one of these things that have a yes, no, or maybe, or whatever exception on here, I'm sure at one time or another, it was a problem. So it's on here for a reason. It isn't just out of the blue that these showed up on this paper we'll accept it, not accept it, or whatever.
I would just like to remind everybody what you said at the beginning, and that is, we all want to involve the public, we want to get their views of what's going on, and that's exactly what we're doing right now. We've got a charrette plan for, how did they ever come up with that name, anyway? They've got a charrette plan for Friday and Saturday, in which they're going to try to gather input. They've been having public meetings and gatherings for months, years, gathering information. So that's part of the process that we're trying to do. So, just thought, go ahead, Henry, my apologies.
So I guess the question is, at this point in time, is do we want to, and I don't mean tonight, because I think we ought to try to put something in writing that we can ponder and reflect on, but do we want to pass on our thoughts to the planning board at this point in time, meaning at our next meeting or one of the 2 meetings in September, pass on specific observations to the planning board at this point in time, or do we want to, I'm also kind of hearing, and maybe I'm misunderstanding it, that there is a sentiment to have at least one public hearing of our own
I'd say
first before we send anything to the planning board?
I'd vote for multiple, because when you do it on one day or one weekend, you inevitably miss. I see this as an important issue, and I think we ought to seek out some people. If there are people who own that land, that undeveloped land, is to bring them in and get their views of where they're trying to take it. That's
Before we go back to the
before we
planning
go
board.
back to the planning board. Try to give them some direction out of that.
I'd like to, I mean, this council as a group for a long time has done things, let's do it right the first time so we don't have to revisit this in another year and change it all over again because we found something or whatever. I'd rather take some time if it's needed and to go through a process of trying to find out what we want to ask the planning board to do in that area. But like I said, it is not what I want to do, it's what the majority of the people and businesses that live there would want to see. So, like what Armin said, should do a public hearing or more than one, and
So maybe what we should do is start an outreach program and specifically invite certain people to address the council at public hearings. Anyone would be welcome, but specifically invite certain property owners and whatnot in the Weirs area to come and give testimony.
How are you going to pick and choose?
It's
Put it in the
You're not
paper.
picking and choosing. I mean, I think you can look at some major landholders, though they obviously have there, but you wouldn't exclude anybody who wanted to come forward. It's just, I think, if we get some of the major interests there, I mean, we've got someone who's making multi-million dollars of investment in the city here.
I mean, we could name
I don't have a
half a dozen
problem.
people right off the top of our heads.
I don't have a problem with any of that. It's not that I'm opposed to that. What my goal is simply when it goes back to the planning board, that, we don't ask for, what are we going to do for changes and get back shorefront residential along with proposed use changes. So we get a little focused about what we're doing, and that's one way to do it. I'm fine with that.
All right, do we have a consensus on that? Yep. See heads nodding? All right, so so what we're looking for is to set up probably more than one, but make a list of specific property owners. They wouldn't be the only people invited, but we would specifically invite certain property owners, like Mr. Mitchell, for example, the Lawtons, et cetera, people who own large tracts of land, the Doyles, to, in that part of the city to come and,
I think once it gets started, I think after the first meeting, I think we would have an influx of people that would want to come in and be heard. I think it's just a matter of getting a few.
so why don't we try to set up that for either depending on what the agenda looks like, for our first or second meeting in September.
We'll also be mindful of we're running out of time before we're going to be hitting people leaving. So we need to get that.
Get at it.
And we're going to get the Weirs Action Committee involved in this, right?
It's up to them,
Huh? Yes?
I suppose.
Okay,
They can be invited too.
sure.
Okay, anything else on this subject? Yes, Councilor Lippman.
I guess the other thing I'd be interested in is, what's going on in other places with respect to managing what Counselor Bounds talked about in terms of trying to avoid, if you will, a disagreement. What are other communities doing to manage the exceptions and variance process that we don't currently do? Or I'd like to hear that from zoning planning perspective. What are some communities that are considered, leaders in that regard and best practices, and what, if anything, aren't we doing, or options aren't we considering?
I don't consider that a disagreement at all.
Okay, anything else on this subject? Okay, we'll move on then to unfinished business. We have one item of unfinished business, and that is the downtown surveillance cameras. And if you'll recall, this, trying to find my paperwork on it, was tabled from our last meeting in July, at which time we had proposed I think Councilor Hamel had proposed that we purchase 3 new cameras with downtown TIF money, and that proposal was to go to the TIF Advisory Committee for a recommendation. Can you report on that, Mr. Myers?
I can. The TIF Advisory Board met last week. I do see 4, I believe, members of the TIF committee here, so maybe I would refer it to the chair of the TIF committee, if that's okay with the mayor, to come up and report out on their actions.
Mr. Wood, welcome.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor, councilors, city manager. Patrick Wood, chair of the Downtown TIF Advisory Committee. We did meet last week. We had Captain Bill Clary join us at that meeting to talk about those cameras. As you may or may not know, we have put out to bid and received bids for cameras in the parking garage, and it's a fairly comprehensive plan. It's been awarded to a specific local company. I'm not sure if it's public yet, but it's in the process. So there will be cameras updated in the parking garage. When we met with the police department, our question was, well, how many cameras do you have now? How many do you think you're going to need? They have 1 already. The discussion that I had before that meeting with Councilor Hamel was 2 to 3. I believe that's what the city council addressed about a month ago. What we talked then about with the police department was, where would those cameras be located? How would they be monitored? What sort of a communication system would we have? And so what we are going to do as part of the TIF committee is to meet with the police department in different places downtown and get ideas as to where the cameras might be located, and also to look at perhaps expanding the camera contract with the parking garage to include cameras there that would focus on certain parts of the downtown that are not currently covered by the existing camera. I will tell you that Captain Clary gave us a little demonstration from his telephone as to what you can see from the existing camera, and it's quite impressive. The detail is significant. These cameras are apparently first-rate. We did have some questions about the lifespan of these cameras, and should we be putting money aside additionally for replacement of cameras. We also talked about the possibility that there are going to be 3 TIF districts. There are 3 TIF districts, but there will be 2 additional ones put together and operating very soon, and so perhaps we ought to be talking to the police department about cameras in those areas as well. So we're following up on it and building on the proposal. We don't have specifics at this point, but we should perhaps by September, your second meeting in September, to present. So, if you have any questions on where we are?
So say that, I'm sorry, Counselor Lippman, go ahead.
So I think we had a specific ask, which was whether you would support the purchase of three cameras. Are you saying no?
No, I'm not saying that at all.
Then are you saying yes? I guess I think we'd try to frame it up to you as a yes or no, not a.
The proposal was to use $13,500 of TIF money to buy 3 cameras.
And what we were saying to the police department, what they were saying back to us is, we may not need 3. We may only need 2. And so we wanted to get a more specific feel from them as to what they felt was appropriate, and then come back and say, yes, let's take this money and do that, or let's take part of it to do that, but part of it to do something with these other cameras here. And we don't want to say no, but we don't want to say absolutely yes, 3. We wanted to get a better idea of what we had in mind, what they had in mind, and how to get that accomplished.
So yes to 2?
It may be 2, it may be 4. We may want more than 3.
Can we get a yes to 2?
Well, we can certainly get a yes to 2. I mean, I think we can, and the question is, where are we going to put them? Right now, they're mounted. And
To me, that, the weeds of those things should be left up to the fire department. Police department. These are movable cameras, and they probably would want to move them locations and things like that. And I don't think the permission of the TIF committee of where they're going to move them to is part of that. I mean, they may have an area that they're having problems with, and they move it maybe that night.
Well, they may.
So, to me, the weeds of the operation should be left up to the police department, because they know where they have problems.
Well, and we agree with you, and that's what we heard from Captain Clary. He told us that they want to work to get the cameras that they feel are necessary, and I think they've asked for almost 10 cameras, or
At one time.
yes, substantially more than that. And based upon what they feel their needs are, then maybe we should be coming back as a TIF committee and saying, well, instead of 2 or 3 or 4, maybe we ought to have more than that. And
I think there's a point at where we can start for this process, and then the other part of that probably can be, discussed further with the TIF committee. I mean, obviously, we don't want to do 10 right now.
No.
So, I think doing 3 and getting the process rolling so that they can have these out in a reasonable time to do this.
Right. And the TIF committee did not vote to fund or recommend funding of any specific cameras at this point. What their feeling was, they wanted more information before they could make a recommendation. You obviously, as a city council, have the right to make whatever decision you want to make with the use of that money. And we're not trying to tell you should or shouldn't. We just wanted to get more information ourselves, because our task...
I think that's something you can do. I mean, you can have meetings with them and get all kinds of information.
Right. Well, I mean, this didn't come to us initially, right? It came, so we got it sort of secondhand. We found out about it, and we're trying to respond to it as best we can. We didn't take a vote or take a position on it, other than we want to meet with the police department, get a better idea as to what they think would be an appropriate and reasonable amount of cameras, and then make the recommendation.
But they were there that night. They didn't, you had that discussion that night. He was there, Captain Clary, right? He was at your meeting.
He was at our meeting last week.
Yeah.
Right. And he did not say 2, 3, 1. He didn't make a recommendation to us on the number of cameras. So we don't have a specific position on number of cameras.
Okay.
Councilor Lippman?
I guess I think that in respecting the process and the TIF, we were looking for some guidance, and we don't want to disrespect the downtown TIF. if we took an action to approve 2 cameras tonight from the TIF, would you view that as being disrespectful to the TIF?
Not at all, not at all, no. I mean, and we're not trying to block or hinder or anything. We're just trying to get information ourselves, because we felt it was an important issue, and we've focused very much on the parking garage.
I think the issue here, if I may, from the city council standpoint, is that we're proposing using TIF district money for this purpose.
Correct.
Okay, so that to me is the major issue here. Not where they're going to go or how many they're going to be or whatever, is more, should we be using TIF district funds for this purpose? And what is your opinion of that?
What we discussed was, what is the purpose of the camera in the first place? Is it to view public areas? Is it to view businesses? What are we trying to accomplish with the cameras? As a TIF district advisory board, what we're focused on is enhancing the economic benefit to the community. And the question that we had was, well, how do these do this? What's the best way to make sure that they accomplish that? If the city council decides to buy 2 or 3 of these cameras, and they say, we would like them in the downtown area, well, that's up to you. You get to decide that. And if you want to take it from the TIF money, that's up to you. We're an advisory committee only.
We know it's up to us. I think the question is this, in your opinion, realizing that the council has the final word on this, is this, in your opinion, a reasonable use of TIF funds?
And my basic response is, we don't have an answer to that yet, because we wanted to meet with the police department, determine where they're going to be, what's the purpose of them, how they're going to be used. Is that going to then benefit the economic welfare of the downtown?
Can I paraphrase?
You've got all kinds of hands up here.
Sorry.
Councilor Bounds.
Would it be fair to say that the TIF committee's response is it's premature for us to make a recommendation to the council with respect to this proposed purchase? Would that be fair to say?
That is fair to say.
Okay, thank you.
Councilor Bolduc.
I don't know what the confusion is. If we're willing to try to help the downtown TIF area, it's up to the police department to figure out where they want to put them. They know where the problems are. To me, that's pretty simple. I don't understand why they wouldn't want us to buy 3 cameras and let the police department put them where they need them.
Councilor Hamel.
Yes. Pat raised the question about, what would they monitor in public, private, or business or whatever. There's a pretty set, defined rule of law of how they can be used. And the police department knows about that. So that's their thing. Police department.
Yeah, I think
On how they can be
the
used.
only issue here, if we were taking this money out of the general fund, it wouldn't matter.
Okay.
But we're taking this money out of the TIF fund, and that's why they're involved, as to whether or not this is an appropriate use, in their opinion, of TIF funds.
I think we reasonably expected that, based on the conversation, that we'd get an answer this evening. And, from an economic standpoint, crime in the downtown area is what we're trying to take out of there. And, I remember Charlie coming in, talking about his store being vandalized, and Shorewood...
Just done again. Just happened again.
Just done again. It'd be nice to know who did it, and so we could stop them from doing it. That's what we're trying to accomplish. I guess...
Plain and simple.
Yeah, that's all.
Any other questions of Mr. Wood?
Thank you very much.
Okay. Anyone care to make a motion? Councilor Bounds, did you have a question first?
Well, it may be the appropriate time to discuss it after the motion is made, and I know what would...
Did you want to make a motion?
Yes. I'd like to make a motion, and with all due respect to the TIF committee,
But I would like to see this move on, and if the police department wants more than, if they want 10 cameras, 20 cameras, whatever, then they can get, a bigger discussion. But we've been talking about this for 6 months now. So I'd like to make a motion that we purchase 3 cameras and use the money from the TIF account not to exceed
$13,500.
$13,500.
Second.
Moved by Counselor Hamel, seconded by Counselor Bolduc. Discussion. Counselor Bounds.
I don't understand why we're not getting the input from the TIF committee. And I don't see how a delay of 2 weeks till our next meeting is going to impact the fight on crime, which is our goal here. I don't...
Then don't vote for it.
I guess if I'm...
Go ahead, finish, and we'll get to Counselor Whitman.
We're talking about taking money from the TIF funds without a recommendation from the TIF committee, who works on this stuff all the time. And let me finish. You're shaking your head. I guess you're not. I guess you don't agree with me, Armand. I can see that.
They don't know where the problems are, the police department.
One at a time,
I don't know what the police department, I'm not saying it's not a police department decision. I'm saying we're looking for TIF committee input, and we don't have it. And why would we act on it when we can get it? There you go. Simple.
Next up's Counselor Lippman, then we'll go to Counselor Lippman.
I think there's been enough evidence, Dave, that we have had problems upon problems in the downtown area, and, I want to be responsive to people who've been victim of crimes, and I think we've, 6 months delay in dealing with this. I just think we asked a reasonable question. I respect the fact that they wanted to think about it more, but I think, we're not talking about implementing a number of cameras that is going to, I think, detract from the TIF being able to do things that they want to do. I just think it's just representative that maybe we needed a written ask as opposed to the more conceptual ask. But I just feel like we got to get moving on this.
Henry, I don't disagree with the approach you have.
Counselor Bolduc is next, and we'll come back to you. Counselor Bolduc.
I agree with what Counselor Lippman just said. Let's get the cameras and let the police department figure out in the TIF area where they need it. They need help to catch these people, and the longer we wait, the more they're going to keep doing what they're doing.
Counselor Bounds.
I agree with what you said, Henry, in terms of the needs we're addressing. I guess I'll say it again and be done with it, because I can see that there's not much agreement on my point of view tonight on this issue. But the TIF committee has a purpose. I don't know whether they were asked late in the process. I don't know how this comes about. But acting on it without their input seems to me to be premature. And the risks associated with not acting on it are de minimis. You can't say, if we don't get these cameras now, if we wait 2 weeks, the crime spree in downtown is going to be rampant and people are going to be hurt. You can't say that. That's a premise that's false. Thank you.
Counselor Doyle.
And again.
Counselor Doyle.
Well, what I heard Patrick say was that, if I misunderstood him, I'm sorry, but what I heard was that the people on the TIF committee weren't really sure where to place the cameras. They weren't really sure how many they were going to need, and that they were looking for additional information. However, the police department, this is what they wanted, and no disrespect to their decisions, but I don't think it was a matter of them not being in favor of purchasing them. I think it was just more a matter of maybe wanting a little bit more input of the logistics of where things were going to go and how many they were going to need, and that's outside of their purview. I take not real issue but slight issue, because I think if it would save one piece of property from being vandalized, I think it would be worth buying them that extra 2 weeks early.
Okay, I'm
just-
just going to repeat this.
Counselor Bounds.
Using that crime stuff is just a false premise, but I can count 5 to 1. Let's move on.
Counselor Bear, would
Right,
you
I
like
was
to get
moving
your,
the question.
any other discussion?
I got one more comment.
Counselor Hamel.
Okay, I agree with Ava. I think Pat in the committee don't disagree with the premise of the cameras. It's maybe where it's going to be, and they might want input with that, which, if the police wants to let them have input with that, that's fine with me. But I think we get the cameras, and they can have all the discussion they want with the police as far as where they're going to go, how you're going to use them, da-da-da. How many more do you need? But let's start somewhere. So
Any
I'm calling
further-
the question.
Any further discussion? No need to call a question.
Okay.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor by Counselor Hamel to authorize the purchase of 3 surveillance cameras from Covert Track Group Incorporated at a price not to exceed $13,500, thank you, with the understanding that the funds would be taken from the downtown TIF District Reserve account. All those in favor, please raise a hand. All those opposed, please raise a hand. We have 5 affirmative votes, 1 no vote, the motion carries. Thank you for the discussion.
Who's the no vote?
Nominations, appointments, and elections.
Are they still here?
Oh, these are people that we interviewed 2 weeks ago. I hope they're
Yeah.
not still.
Can I-
Well,
Sorry, Counselor Bear.
yeah, one of the ones that we did this evening on the, gotta find it now. There was only one vacancy, and somebody applied for it at the last meeting 2 weeks ago.
I'm not following you.
Wait a minute.
I think Mr. Mayor, she's referring to the interviewee we had for the Heritage Commission 2 weeks ago. We had
Yes.
another one
We had one
tonight.
interview
We
2
were
weeks
not going
ago,
to be
one
looking to
interview
vote on
tonight,
that
and
one
we're going to
tonight.
have the election at our next meeting.
Oh, at the next, because usually tonight we would have done it,
And
but we're
because-
going to do that one too. Okay,
We're going to postpone that election until the first meeting of September,
all right.
for the Heritage Commission. Okay, Conservation Commission.
I want to try this, and you tell me if it works. I want to move the entire slate of...
Can't do that,
Can't
sir.
do that.
Why not? Okay, somebody better explain that to me at some point in time, but not tonight.
Conservation Commission. We have 3 regular positions available. We have 2 people applying for reappointment. A motion would be in order to appoint Deborah Williams, seeking reappointment as a full member of the Conservation Commission through a 3-year term expiring August 2018.
So moved.
Moved by Counselor Bear, is there a second? Counselor Bolduc seconds that motion. Any discussion? All those in favor of appointing Deborah Williams to the Conservation Commission, please raise a hand. Vote is 6 affirmative, and that appointment is ratified. Next up, we have Michael Foote. Motion be in order to appoint Michael Foote to a 3-year term on the Conservation Commission with the term expiring August 2018.
So moved.
By Counselor Bear, seconded by Counselor Bolduc. Is there any discussion of that appointment? All those in favor of appointing Michael Foote to the Conservation Commission, please raise a hand. We have 6 votes in the affirmative, and that appointment is also confirmed. Downtown TIF Advisory Board. We have Robert Sawyer seeking appointment to a full 3-year term. Is there a motion to appoint Robert Sawyer? Motion by Counselor Bear, seconded by Counselor Hamel. Any discussion of appointing Robert Sawyer to a 3-year term on the Downtown TIF District Advisory Board? All those in favor, please raise a hand.
Aye.
Vote is 6-0, and Mr. Sawyer is appointed to a 3-year term on the TIF District Advisory Board. Highway Safety Commission. 1 public member position is available. A motion would be in order to appoint Edmund Pierce to a 3-year term on the Highway Safety Commission with a term expiring March of 2018. Motion by Counselor Bear, seconded by Counselor Bolduc. Any discussion of that appointment? All those in favor of appointing Edmund Pierce to the Highway Safety Commission, please raise a hand.
Aye.
Vote is 6-0, and that appointment is also confirmed. Finally, for the Zoning Board of Adjustment, we have 2 regular positions and 4 alternate positions available. And a motion would be in order to appoint Michael Foote to a full 3-year term on the Zoning Board of Adjustment with the term expiring August 2018.
So moved.
Moved by Counselor Bolduc, seconded by Counselor Bear. Any discussion of the Michael Foote appointment? All those in favor of appointing Mr. Foote, please raise a hand.
Aye.
Vote is 6 in the affirmative, and that appointment is confirmed. And finally, we have an application from Roland Mayhew for a 3-year term on the Zoning Board of Adjustment. A motion would be in order to appoint Mr. Mayhew. Moved by Counselor Bolduc, seconded by Counselor Bear. Any discussion of appointing Mr. Mayhew to the Zoning Board of Adjustment? All those in favor, please raise a hand.
Aye.
Vote is 6 in the affirmative, and Mr. Mayhew's appointment is also confirmed. And that ends our appointments for tonight. And we're on to council comments, with an explanation to come to Counselor Bounds as to why we can't do that in one motion. Council comments, Counselor Hamel.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. I want to kind of go along with what you were talking about Motorcycle Week and what motorcyclists do. Lately, there's been several charity-run fundraisers for different things, and I just wanted to bring up a few. Not this past weekend, but the weekend before, there was Brenda's Ride, and I believe that was $9,000 that went to, is it oncology at LRGH. This past weekend, and I believe they had over 200 riders in that group. This past weekend, they had a ride called David's House Ride, which is a fundraiser for David's House in Lebanon at Dartmouth Hitchcock Hospital. And I didn't hear the results of that because I was on a ride myself, but last year they had roughly between 200 and 300 riders for that. It's police escorted from, I think it's Hart's Restaurant up to Lebanon. And yesterday there was a New England, what they call Ride for Kids. It benefits Pediatric Brain Tumor Foundation, both at Dana-Farber and Harvard Cancer Research. These are for kids that are diagnosed at a very young age with brain tumors. And this ride started in 1984. And since then, just motorcyclists alone, cross-country, have raised over $75 million to support this research. This past Sunday, we raised $41,000. So,
Rogers Ride coming up this Sunday.
Rogers Ride is this Sunday, and that is dedicated to, I think it's pancreatic research, I believe.
Kidney cancer.
Kidney cancer, yep. And that'll be this coming Sunday, and it leaves from Rotary Park. I think registration is 8 to 10 or 9 to 10, and the ride leaves at 10. And it was interesting for the Ride for Kids and the Brain Tumor Foundation. There was a doctor there from Harvard, and he spoke of how grants over the years for this research has gone, like from when they do applications, 60% were granted the grants. It's down to 7%. So basically, these rides that people do is funding research for these things. And just to go back in '84, if a child was diagnosed with this, they didn't make it. And today, the foundation is giving scholarships to these kids. So.
Any other council comments? Councilor Bounds.
During the torrential downpour, Dew Tiles down on Messer Street was severely impacted. I went out there with Paul Monahan to look at it and what they were doing, and essentially what it is the drain that feeds from the Taylor home and from Irving centralizes there and releases out into Lake Opeechee under the railroad tracks. And it's a significant project in terms of repair. I think it's some 75 years old. And I was specifically asked to address you on putting it on the capital improvements projects for consideration in September.
The CPI?
Yeah.
Actually, Paul would have to present that.
He's already done, he's going to do that. and
Yeah, okay, then that's fine.
Yeah, I was just going to give you an alert about what was going on and
Yep.
that was coming.
Yeah, that all gets presented to the CIP committee, which Ava's part of, and then a tabulation is done, it's scored, and given to the city manager to
Well, I
finance.
told Paul and Mr. Dutile that I would bring it up at the city council meeting and let you know that that was coming, so I've done that.
Counselor Bear?
Referring back to the motorcycle discussion, it wasn't mentioned, but I believe I read in the paper this week that Meredith voted to waive all vendor fees for vendors in Meredith.
To not institute them. We
Right.
don't have them now.
Well, yeah, which of course undercuts vendors in Laconia, and probably looks like they're trying to establish another front. But it is part of the problem. I mean, I'm sure vendors will go to Meredith if it's going to be free.
Well, and Mrs. Deely mentioned it's not just the Meredith front, but she's under pressure because the party that has organized vendors at the Speedway, Counselor Hamill and I rode down there this year to that, where the demo rides were, and they have a number of upscale vendors up there as well. And my understanding is that the company that, it isn't the track, they rent the land from the track,
Right.
from the Speedway, but the company that rents the land is making a hard push to get the vendors that are currently in Meredith to come to Loudon. So there's a lot of competition out there.
Yeah, the thing that happens in Meredith, they're already there, but they don't pay anything. So they want them to pay now, just like we have them pay here in Laconia.
Well, their select board voted not to charge.
Well, then the taxpayers have to pay for the policeman. So
That's what they were.
Yeah, there's no town vendor fee at Meredith, and they rejected a proposal to institute one.
Yeah.
It's costing them money for police and
Yeah.
stuff, and they don't have it to pay, so.
But, like the mayor said, we went down to the track to see that, and they have a great place for the demo rides. I can't say not.
Yeah.
But I think there was probably less people than what we had at our place here when they were
When we
here
were down,
downtown.
yeah.
Yeah, there wasn't a lot
Well,
of
it's a
people.
long way for people to go for.
That's it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Any other council comments? Counselor Lippman?
Council's had some correspondence on our decision-making around the elderly exemption, and just for the record, that it was brought to committee and looked at, received a letter from a constituent concerned that we didn't make a decision that supported changing it. It was based on our collective interpretation, a judgment that Laconia's position was fairly established, and that we did hear the concern, and we implemented a policy change that would be reviewed every other year to make sure, so we're going to collect the information. Just want to, the constituent reached out to a number of us on the council and wanted to make sure that that was publicly laid out there, and that's accomplishing that by raising it under council comments. Take their concern seriously. On the other hand, it's a balancing of competing interests in terms of, an exemption someone else in the town has to pay for, and what we were looking at was, how competitive ours were, and I think in a number of areas, we led comparably sized communities throughout the state. And, we have a commitment of continuing to relook at it, but at this point, our collective judgment was that we were in the right place, balancing the various competing interests.
Any other council comments?
Motion
Motion to adjourn would be in order, made by Counselor Bolduc, seconded by Counselor Hamill.
I gotta talk to you.
Any discussion? All those in favor of adjourning, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? We are adjourned at 9:18.
Sunday. Yeah.
Oh, no.
I really don't know.
I mean, you can still get whatever.
You guys can settle that anytime you want. I just want to get the cameras.
Once you decided to buy
Think-
it,
think
you
it
thought
is.
about I misunderstood. I thought you were going to have a discussion on this tonight.
I sort of thought we were
On what?
going to get into our differences between communities.